lone human crash lands on an icy alien world, ruled by a queen known only for her silence and steel. But when his hands touch her broken technology, he awakens more than power. He sparks something forgotten deep within her frozen heart. What begins as survival turns into an alliance, and then into something even more dangerous: trust. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show us some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. Taranvel didn't expect to survive the crash. The ice planet had appeared on his scanners only moments before his ship lost control. Something had interfered with his systems, sending him into a spiraling descent through blinding snow and razor-sharp winds. When the ship finally slammed into the icy ground, the sound was like the sky cracking open. Metal screeched, panels exploded in sparks. Then, silence. Inside the twisted wreckage, Taran stirred. He groaned, pain shooting through his side. The cabin was tilted at an angle, half buried in snow. Cold air hissed through a broken seam in the hull. He coughed and pushed himself up, brushing frost from his face. Blood from a shallow cut on his brow mixed with melting snow. Everything hurt, but he was alive. That had to count for something. He pulled on his heavy coat and gathered what supplies he could salvage: tools, a few rations, a heat pack. Through the cracked viewport, he saw the strange landscape outside. Jagged ice formations rose like frozen flowers from the ground. In the distance, something shimmered. A structure. A fortress? He narrowed his eyes. It was massive, with towers of silver and blue crystal piercing the sky. It looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. There were lights, maybe power, maybe life. Taran set out across the snow. His boots crunched through the thick frost. The wind howled, biting through layers of fabric like claws. It took hours to reach the gates. His hands were shaking, teeth chattering, but he kept moving. Survival was just another kind of engineering problem, one you solved step by step. Fortress didn't open for him, not at first. He stood beneath its towering walls, waving a flare and shouting into the cold. Finally, the gates parted with a groan of ancient gears, and he stepped into a place that felt more like a dream than reality. Inside was warmer, but only slightly. Everything sparkled with frozen light. Guards with pale blue skin and silver armor stood on high balconies, watching him. No one spoke. Their eyes were sharp, their weapons sharper. Taran kept his hands visible, made no sudden moves. He was a guest here. Barely. At the heart of the fortress, seated on a throne of carved crystal and polished stone, was Queen Cullen Thorn. She was still as a statue, watching the human like one might study an unfamiliar creature. Her hair was silver white, braided and looped into a high crown behind her head. Her skin was smooth and pale, her golden eyes steady and unreadable. Armor of silver and ice wrapped around her like a second skin, and she wore a flowing cloak that rippled like frozen mist. He bowed, awkwardly. Taranvel, he said. Engineer. Emergency landing. Didn't mean to drop in uninvited. Silence stretched across the hall. Kellen's fingers drummed once against the arm of her throne. She didn't speak, not yet. But something flickered. In her gaze, not kindness, not yet, but curiosity. A guard stepped forward and handed her a small device. A translator, probably. She activated it and finally addressed him, her voice cool and measured. You landed near our outer shield line, she said. What were you doing in restricted airspace? I didn't mean to be, Taran answered, his voice hoarse. My ship was damaged. Something interfered with my navigation. I crashed. I saw your fortress and came here for help. More silence. The guards seemed tense, hands near their weapons. But Kellen only nodded once. "You're not the first outsider to come here uninvited," she said. "Most do not leave." Taran exhaled slowly. "Then let me earn my way out." He looked up at the towering windows of the throne room. Outside, the storm still raged. Blue energy flickered against the glass shields, unstable. He noticed the subtle dimming of light, the hum of machinery too quiet. He turned to Kellen again. "Your systems, they're failing," he said. "The power distribution, overcomplicated. It's beautiful work, but inefficient." "You speak as if you understand." "Our technology. I understand energy," he said simply. "Circuits, flows, redundancies. You don't need advanced translation to feel when something's off." Kellen studied him. Then, unexpectedly, she rose. Her movement was fluid, precise. The room quieted. Taran felt 1,000 eyes on him. Let him see the outer conduits. She told her captain, "If he damages anything, he'll handle it." The guards parted. Taran gave a half grin and followed, his breath fogging in the cold air. As he passed beneath Kellen's gaze, their eyes met again. His warm brown eyes, her icy gold. He didn't know what he saw in them, but it was enough to make him wonder. Maybe this place wasn't just cold. Maybe something here was waiting to. Thaw.*Taren Vel worked through the night. His fingers, though still numb from the cold, moved with confidence over the alien circuits. The outer shield conduits had been overloaded by what he guessed was decades of patchwork repairs. Wires had been rerouted too many times, creating bottlenecks in the energy flow. To him, it was like untangling a nest of metal vines, but he saw the pattern. He always did. Kellen Thorne watched from a distance. She didn't speak, didn't interrupt, just observed. Her golden eyes followed every motion of the human's hands, curious and calculating. She couldn't deny his skill. The shield grid was stabilizing slowly, but clearly. Each adjustment Taran made brought back the hum of power like a heartbeat returning to a sleeping beast. Still, she kept her distance. This man was an outsider, and Narevia had not thrived for so long by trusting strangers. When dawn touched the horizon with pale light, Kellen turned and left. She told herself it was practicality that kept her from speaking to him. Her people had enough to worry about without their queen distracted by an off-world mechanic. Taren didn't notice her leave. He was too focused. But when the repair was done and the lights returned to full brightness, a quiet voice greeted him. "You've worked all night," said Luma, a soft-spoken medic with sky-blue skin and glowing white eyes. She approached with a thermal blanket and a steaming cup of broth. "You need rest and food." Taran accepted both with a tired smile. "Thanks. I'm used to pulling long shifts." "Ships don't fix themselves. I've heard humans are stubborn," Luma said gently. "You seem to be proving the theory." "Comes with the territory," he said, sipping the broth. It was strange but comforting, like spiced snow. Luma sat beside him and checked a small device that scanned his vital signs. "You're strong," she said, "but this world takes from everyone. Be careful not to give too much." He didn't answer right away. He looked out toward the courtyard, where snowflakes drifted down like falling stars. "I've seen a lot of places," he said finally. "Broken places. This one. It's still standing. It's cold, yeah, but not lifeless. Feels like it's just waiting for something to wake it up." Luma tilted her head, watching him. "You speak like someone who sees more than metal and circuits. I fix what I can. Sometimes that's machines. Sometimes it's people." That made her smile. "Be careful," she said again. "Not everyone here wants to be fixed." Taran didn't reply, but her words stayed with him. Later that day, Kellen appeared again. This time, she brought him to the shield control chamber, deep beneath the young fortress. A glow of blue crystals lit the walls. and the hum of power echoed like a song through the stone. "You were right," she admitted without looking at him. "The original system was elegant, but flawed. We built it for display, not for survival. Your people like beauty," he said. "But sometimes efficiency is the real strength." She looked at him sharply, ready to defend her culture, but stopped. There was no judgment in his voice, just truth. She nodded once. "Show me," she said. For the next hour, they worked side by side. Taran explained his improvements, drawing in the air with his fingers, guiding her hand to feel the changes in the current. Kellen, usually so composed and distant, listened with quiet intensity. Once, their fingers touched over a conduit. She flinched at the warmth of his skin. He didn't notice or pretended not to. But her heart beat faster. "You care too much," she said, suddenly. Taran looked at her, confused. "About what?" "About people you barely know. About places you don't belong to." "I've spent a long time not belonging anywhere," he said. "But that doesn't mean I stopped caring." Kellen said nothing, but her gaze lingered on him longer than she meant. That night, the two sat by a quiet generator core. Not as queen and outsider, but as two people slowly unraveling the distance between them. Taran told her stories of ships he'd fixed on desert worlds, of strange creatures that traded star maps for music. Kellen, to her own surprise, told him about the paintings in her private chamber's landscapes of green worlds her ancestors had once visited, places she had never seen. "You want something different," he said, watching her closely. She looked away. "I was born to protect what is, not to dream of what could be." "You can do both," he said. Their eyes met again. This time, the silence was not cold. From a shadowed hallway, someone watched them. Taran, a young apprentice technician, stood hidden. His eyes were wide with something between awe and concern. The queen was changing. The fortress was changing. And not everyone would welcome it. Far away, beyond the snowy mountains, a signal linked to life. A transmission sent in secret, received by a hidden base. The message was short. "The human is here. Everything is falling into place." But inside the fortress, Kellen and Taran didn't know yet. For now, they only knew that for the first time in a long while, the frost didn't feel so cold. The warning came just before sunrise. A loud, sharp alarm echoed through the fortress, waking everyone in an instant. Lights flashed red in the corridors, and heavy boots pounded against stone floors. Queen Kellen Thorne stood at the center of the command platform, her long coat sweeping behind her as she moved quickly through her guards. Snow still clung to the edges of her cloak from the early morning inspection. Her golden eyes were sharp with focus, though a flicker of worry hid behind them. Tare and Vel was already there when she arrived. His hair was damp, his coat half-sipped, but his hands moved steadily over the console. "Multiple energy signatures coming from the eastern ridge," he said. "Small units fast, but organized. They're targeting the outer shield grid. The section I repaired." Colin's voice was calm, but clipped. "Is it holding?" "For now, but they're using harmonic disruptors. Smart tech. It's not random." Taran looked up, his brown eyes full of concern. Someone told them exactly where to hit. Kellen stared at him. The air between them changed just slightly. "And how would you know that?" Taran didn't blink. "Because I've seen it before. This is military grade. Precision. Someone fed them detailed specs about your defenses, your shield patterns. This wasn't just a lucky guess." Lieutenant Drex, Kellen's most trusted guard, stepped forward. His face was carved from stone. "It happened where the human worked," he said darkly. "Too convenient." Kellen raised a hand. "Enough?" She looked at Taran again, more guarded now. "If you had anything to do with this." "I didn't," he said firmly. I've been trying to protect this place. You know that. The tension was thick, but there was no time to argue. Another blast shook the outer wall, making dust fall from the ceiling. One of the tech officers shouted, "Shields are down to 60%. The eastern conduit is fluctuating." Taran stepped back, holding up his hands. "Let me fix it." Callan hesitated, then nodded. "Go." Drex, 2 guards with him, eyes on him at all times. Taran didn't argue. He knew the suspicion was natural. He also knew the truth was more dangerous than they realized. In the generator room, the air crackled with static. Sparks flew from exposed panels. Technicians shouted over each other, struggling to keep up. Taran dropped to one knee and opened a control panel with practiced speed. "The disruptors are syncing with the shield resonance," he said. "Have to?" Himself. "They're forcing an overload loop. It's going to burn out the whole grid." "How do you know this?" one technician demanded. "Because it's what I would do if I wanted to cripple this place," Taran snapped. "Now shut up and help me reroute the signal dampeners." As he worked, Kellen's voice came through the communicator. "Taran, we found something." He paused, hands hovering over the console. "What?" "There was a data breach," she sighed, her voice hard. "Someone accessed our shield schematics days ago. The logs were erased, but one name came up again and again. Varen." Taran looked up sharply. "Your lead technician?" The communicator crackled. "He's missing. Disappeared just before the attack." The pieces fell into place. Taran felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "He helped me during the upgrades," he said slowly. "He knew every change I made. He said he wanted to learn." "He was learning," Callan said bitterly, "so he could undo it." A massive surge rocked the generator room. One of the conduits burst, sending fire spraying across the wall. The tech crew dove for cover. Taran didn't flinch. He reached into his pack, pulled out a bypass coil, and jammed it into place. "I can stabilize it," he said into the communicator. "But I need someone to hold the surge junction." "I'll do it," came Kellen's voice. Within minutes, she arrived, her armor scorched from earlier battle. She didn't hesitate. She knelt beside Taran, her hands steady despite the danger. "You trust me again?" he asked, glancing at her. She didn't look away. "I'm trusting my instincts." Together, they worked. The energy roared around them, heat washing over their skin, but they didn't stop. Kellen held the junction steady as Taran realigned the dampeners. "Now!" he shouted. She pushed the final clamp into place. The lights flared, then steadied. The shield grid roared back to life, stronger and brighter than before. Outside, the disruptors fell silent. Breathing hard, Kellen leaned against the wall. Taran collapsed beside her. "You saved us," she said quietly. "You helped," he replied. For a moment, they sat in the flickering light, the danger not fully gone, but the worst moment behind them. Their hands were close, almost touching. "I was wrong to doubt you," Kellen said, barely above a whisper. "I get it," he said softly. "This place, it's your life. You can't afford to trust easily." She turned to him, her golden eyes warm for the first time. "But maybe it's time I learned how." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But the space between them had changed. In the darkness beyond the fortress, Varen ran through the snow, sending one last signal to his true master. But inside the walls, for the first time in years, hope flickered like fire beneath the frost. Asterisk. Battle was over, but its mark lingered on every stone and soul within the fortress. Cracks in the walls had been sealed, burnt panels replaced, scars on armor polished, but not forgotten. It was quiet now, not with emptiness, but with a strange new energy. Narevia had not only survived the attack, it had changed. So had its people. And standing at the heart of that change were Taran and Cullen. They walked together through the central hall, where sunlight streamed through tall glass windows repaired just days before. Children chased each other across the polished floor, their laughter bouncing off the cold stone with warmth that had been missing for generations. Vendors had begun to set up stalls again. Food, tools, even pieces of human and alien tech were traded openly now. It wasn't just a market. It was a sign, a symbol that rebuilding had begun. Callan no longer wore the full armor of war. Her robe, a deep blue, flowed behind her with a quiet grace. The crown remained, but it looked less like a wall and more like a reminder of what she had carried and what she now shared. Taran walked beside her, his simple jacket marked with patches of grease and repair. He still fixed things, only now. Those things included trust, diplomacy, and hearts that had been shut for far too long. The council chamber, once a quiet place of orders and tradition, now buzzed with debate and discussion. Representatives from across the region, some human, some alien, filled the seats. They argued, laughed, clashed, and collaborated. Ideas flew faster than weapons once had. There were talks of rebuilding cities, opening trade routes, sharing technology. And most surprisingly, they listened to Taren. His ideas were bold, combining human power systems with alien resonance fields, proposing education exchanges, even setting up shared defense programs. At first, there was hesitation. But Kellen stood beside him, not behind. Her approval silenced doubters and gave courage to those who had quietly hoped for a new way. Her people respected her. And now, they began to trust him too. At night, the fortress no longer felt cold. Fires burned in gathering halls, and stories were shared over food and drink. Luma, the medic, led health teams that now included humans. Taran, once nervous and shy, led a workshop of young inventors, many of whom wore mismatched tools on their belts, just like Taran. Even Lieutenant Drex, once so guarded, began to smile more often. He still watched Taran like a hawk, but with something close to pride. Callan and Taran often found themselves walking the same hallways where they had once spoken in silence, unsure of each other. Now they spoke freely, about politics, about the stars, about silly things that didn't matter and deep things that did. Sometimes they talked until sunrise. Sometimes they said nothing at all and simply stood in the courtyard, side by side, watching the lights of the fortress flicker like stars trapped in crystal. But not everyone had forgotten the past. A message arrived one evening, carried by a scout whose breath smoked in the winter air. Vex, Kellen's cousin, had returned, not with an army, but with a request. A meeting. A conversation. The council urged caution. Drex was ready for war. Taran watched Kellen carefully, knowing the pain that name carried for her. But she surprised everyone. Let him come, she said. But not to threaten us. To see what we've built. When Vex arrived, the fortress was ready, but not with weapons. The great hall had been cleared, chairs placed in a circle. No throne, no guards at the front. Just voices, conversation. And when Vex entered, scarred and tired, he didn't find a frightened city clinging to survival. He found a thriving community where old enemies shook hands and young ones worked together without even thinking twice about species or rank. Callan greeted him without armor, her golden eyes calm. Taran stood nearby, but didn't speak. He didn't have to. His presence said enough. Vex sat. He listened. And though he said little, something in his posture softened. No agreements were signed that day, no promises made. But when he left, he took no hostages and made no threats. Sometimes peace begins with nothing more than not choosing war. Weeks passed. Repairs turned into improvements. Nerevia became a place others visited not to conquer, but to learn. Scouts from distant planets came to observe how humans and aliens had learned to live, build, and grow together. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Turin sat with Kellen in the old generator room, the very place they had saved together. The machines hummed, smoother and quieter than before. She turned to him, her expression softer than the firelight. "You could leave," she said. "You've done more than enough." "I could," he agreed, "but I don't want to." "Why?" He smiled. "Because I didn't just fix a shield here. I found something I didn't know I needed. A place to belong. Someone to stand beside." Kellen leaned her head on his shoulder, a rare gesture of peace. "Then stay. Not as a guest, as part of us." He didn't answer with words. Instead, he took her hand in his warm and steady, and watched the snow fall beyond the crystal windows. Not as a traveler, not as a stranger, but as someone who had helped melt a frozen world and who had, in return, found a home.